Hi, I'm glad you could join me in my study. Over the last several weeks together, we've been thinking about the doctrine of the atonement, both exegetically, that is to say biblically, and church historically, that is to say examining the history of doctrine with regard to the atonement. Exegetically, we saw that there are several prominent biblical motifs that characterize the doctrine of the atonement. Christ's death as a sacrificial offering, Jesus as the suffering servant of Isaiah 53, Christ's death as bringing justification and forgiveness of sins, and Christ's death as a redemption from sin. Any adequate Christian doctrine of the atonement must take account of these biblical data. We then looked at some of the attempts historically to make sense of the atonement, the ransom theory of the early church fathers, the satisfaction theory of St. Anselm, the penal substitution theory of the reformers, and finally the governmental theory of Hugo Grotius. We're now ready to turn to philosophical reflection upon these subjects. And I hope that the method that we've pursued in doing this will be instructive. As Christian philosophers, we need to take the biblical data seriously in doing our philosophical work. Any theory of the atonement, however congenial and appealing, which does not make sense of the biblical data, just is not an adequate Christian theory of the atonement. And therefore, that's why we've spent so much time in looking exegetically at the biblical teaching on the atonement, as well as what others have said about it historically, before we finally come to reflect upon it philosophically. Now, as we turn to philosophical thinking about the doctrine of the atonement, we'll enter into a field of philosophy which is new for me, and that is the philosophy of law. Particularly within the philosophy of law, there are debates raging about the theory of punishment, which are directly relevant to the Christian doctrine of the atonement. And so it is to those debates that we must now turn our attention.